Hi, I'm Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is an end-to-end video in 8 parts of my painting Mount Gretna home. For part 2, I began to paint, and I'm making lots of use of my spray bottle. Maybe it will give you some ideas too. Please give it a thumbs up if you like it, and subscribe to see more. And let's get started painting. Masking complete and dry, now I begin to paint. I'm using my spray bottle to apply tiny drops of water in some places on the painting. I'm using paper to block the spray where I don't want it to run into the art. The sky has been then sprayed, the background behind the house. And instead of just painting with a flat stroke, I am dropping bits of color into the little dots of sprayed water. What I'm hoping for is to catch little bits of light interspersed all throughout the painting. I'm showing some blue turquoise for the sky that shows through, and a lot of trees. I love how the paint runs right on the page. It does beautiful blends. So I am not really mixing much in my palette at this point. I am letting the paint mix directly on the paper. As you see, I'm trying to let a lot of white dots gleam through the paint. I'm trying to create a sparkle effect. And this is sort of a pointillistic type of approach with all these little dots of paint. I have a realistically drawn building, and yet I want to have an impressionistically done set of plants. The building is solid, but the plants dance with light. To get my deepest colors, I'm mixing together a lot of indigo and Hooker's Green Deep. This, where I'm working right now, is the huge tree that goes across the front of the building and divides it. The light is coming in onto this scene from the right-hand side. So the left side is going to be a darker side. If you're consistent in using your light source, your painting will look a lot more realistic and have more depth, even if you're using a pointillistic, impressionistic type of approach like I am here. Again, blocking off the building, and I'm going to spray with a fine mist spray bottle onto my background. I just blotted some overspray with a paper towel. You might notice where I have the tree against the chimney. I've made my paint darker, and that is because I want to showcase the brilliance of the chimney with where the sunlight's coming on it and create a foil of light to dark. Look how I can paint right over top of the flag and overlap it, and yet I know that the masking fluid will keep it clean. That's why you use masking fluid, so you don't have to paint around everything. Are you seeing me go back in and putting stronger darks down? As you know, a wet watercolored paper dilutes the paint, and what looks perfect applied, very, very wet, will fade as it dries. And this is just a fact of watercolor. So I will put on several layers even while it's wet. This is still quite wet. I'm coming in to work on one side of the chimney. Using a lot of burnt sienna here. If I let that paint touch into the background, it's going to run. And you can see it has run a little bit at the top of the chimney. There is some masking applied there, so that can be touched up. And you have to decide whether you want to go back and blot it up or not, or if it doesn't bother you that much to have a little bit of merging of nature colors and man-made colors. I'm shadowing the chimney more heavily around where the plants are growing up it, as well as toward the house where it is shadowed. This is the dark side of the chimney. With the light source coming from the right, the front facing will be the brightest spot of the chimney. I'm working in the ivy which climbs up the chimney. This is still quite wet. I'm allowing it to run as it wishes. This is the shaded side of the house. And I'm starting out with a mixture of cobalt blue and turquoise. At this stage, I'm working very loosely. I'm using the spray bottle. I'm letting the paint mix directly on the paper. And I'm basically laying in shadows and laying in basic features. This is working very wet. And when it's dry, I will be going back in to tighten things up more. But the loose stage is enjoyable to work with. And it also can afford some interesting textures as you work. It looks like I stopped for the day at that point and everything is now dry. Work beginning on the roof in the shaded side. I'm coming in with a mixture of Indian red and burnt sienna here. This picks up on the colors in the chimney as well and allows for a continuity of the same color going around the painting. Adding some deeper browns. And remember that the masking is there on the shingles to show the texture. So when that masking comes off, there's going to be a lot of pure whites on that roof, which will need some further work. Hand and paper are masking off the top roof area. And I don't want to wet the background and let it run into there. Looks like it ran a little bit from the front tree I started. but I was able to blot that off. Burnt sienna and some yellow ochre coming in here. I figured with all of the very cool greens in the picture, I wanted to have some very nice warm colors in the roof of the building, as well as the chimney. Going back and adding my darks again. You see that I painted darkness right against where the bright chimney front is going to be. Again, to set it off. Now I'm working with the vine that climbs up the porch and all the way up to the roof. I'm applying my colors in a very dotty manner. And I'm letting the wet paper pull the colors around a little bit so they aren't very tight. Beginning the foliage on the window box. Most likely they were geraniums. And making the climbing ivy a little darker. But as I move it toward the right hand side, or my light source side, it's going to get lighter. I found it's easier to control painting wet colors onto an area that's already wet if you use small dots. Moving ahead, I've re-wet the front tree that climbs up the front of the house, and I'm coming in with some stronger darks on it. Everything else would appear to be dry. mixing up a good rich dark color. There were some very good deep shadows underneath the porch, around the flag, and around the darker colored leaves and baskets over there. So I'm applying a first layer, starting with just painting water, and then I'll be dropping that dark color into it. Here I'm painting around the supports to the roof. That's always exciting to see the paint spread into wet areas. The reason I applied the water first was because I wanted it to drift into the wet paint or the wet surface in a non-uniform manner. I may work further to darken that color more after it dries. For right now, I just wanted to get it marked out and yet not just be a solid. So using the wet paper first and then applying rich colored paint to that is going to enhance that non-uniform quality, which I think could be more interesting even in a dark area. Finding more of the shadows in the porch overhang, finding where my front door is to the building, and sketching out some darks between the plants. And remember, this is the shaded side of the building. Each plant will have a heavier shadow on the left side. A perfect foil to an orangey brick color is a turquoise blue color. It's a color combination I find particularly attractive personally, and I tend to use it in my paintings whenever I get a chance, just because I like it. To keep my shadows dark, you'll notice I'm adding purples to them. But I also think that purple and indigo are so much more interesting for shadowy colors than just plain gray. But that's a personal preference again. I really enjoy seeing colors in grays and in neutral colors and enhancing what I see. Back to another session. That little leaf is something I did for another demonstration. And now I'm going to punch up the front of the chimney with some very brilliant sunlit colors. It's bright, but I sort of like it. And if I need to take it down a little bit to be a little bit less brilliant, I could certainly do that at a later stage. But I wanted that chimney to be prominent, and I think I certainly have done that. Balancing that a little bit on the left, more shadowy side of the chimney. And starting the first flowers in the window box. Taking that burnt sienna back into the roof. And some yellow ochre up into the other roof. This painting was sort of like a big puzzle because I could only do a section at a time. Each section was done, drying time was done between, and then just about every section needed to be gone back over to add more shadows, more details, and in some cases, another glazing layer of paint or two. It was a complicated process and takes many hours to get through it, but I had something I wanted to say, and I was pretty excited and challenged by doing this artwork. So I just kept at it. Every little piece of the puzzle goes together to lay out the image before the image is then further detailed and further refined. Step by step. And that was exactly what went into painting this very complicated composition. There were some fun shadows to play with on the sunlit side of the building, because all the trees were casting shadows as well as the sun hitting where it did, and leaving the strongest whites, which I had blocked out previously. At this point, though, I'm just blocking in the shadows of the windows. And marking again where another large stand of ivy is climbing the house. At this point, the entire right side of the house is very wet. And soon I will have to move on to another section or stop painting for the day. Ah, there's the ivy climbing up. Hoping you enjoyed this video and that you learned something too, as well as me learning something. I appreciate your likes, and please do subscribe. If you click on the bell and select all, you'll get a ring whenever I post a new video. Your comments are always welcome, and I will see you soon with a new end-to-end painting. So don't forget to subscribe.